Yeah. Hello and welcome to the first Shooting the Shit of 2021. Hello, girls. It only seems like 2 minutes since we were here moaning about how much work we had to do to get ready for Christmas. And we're back and it's a brand new year and everything's changed. We're out of lockdown. The pandemic's gone. No, well, maybe not. How are you both? Joanne, how are you?
Yeah, all right. Same old, same old. It's just sort of continued on, hasn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Indeed. Marisha, how are you?
Yeah, much the same, to be honest. We're just kind of, it's just carrying on. And yeah, to clarify, I'm not in my pajamas. This is outerwear, but we'll roll with it.
It's the cat body. What
the
more? If anything embodies our lives in 2020/2021, it is the cat hoodie.
It's me. Yeah, it's doing this from a bedroom in a cat hoodie, looking like
a blanket. I hope you've got a bit of duvet wrapped around you.
Yeah, well.
Anyway, we are here today to talk about the USA elections. We're going to talk about women in power in the USA elections. Have you both been glued to your television sets over the past few weeks watching this?
I loved the inauguration. I got so excited and emotional. I was there. I was watching the build-up. BBC had this great split screen where it was waiting for Trump to exit Air Force One and Biden to arrive. I was there, loving it, holding back the tears. I was enjoying it. I don't want to say too much of the other, but when it came to the day, I was there.
Yes, I must admit, I have very few elections. So most American elections, I get kind of bored by halfway through. But this one, well, you've got to be, haven't you? One little side note, though, I don't know if you noticed that what's her name? Not Ivanka Trump, his new wife. What's she called? Trump's wife.
Melania. What's the name?
Melania. Yeah, so Melania, she was like, I am done with this shit. Did you see? She was like, first opportunity she got, she was there in her sandals and her little caftan dress, and she was like, I am out of here.
Oh, I love that maxi dress. I've got to say, whatever you say about her, I was like digging the 70s maxi dress. Loved it.
She did look amazing. But to be fair, I mean, she didn't ask for any of that. There's a lot of stuff about Melania, and I think she's a much more intelligent woman than anybody gives her credit for. But yeah, she was just like, that's it. I've done my time. I've had enough. How long do we reckon until they get divorced?
Ooh.
3 months.
Yeah,
maybe 6 at the most.
Talking about kind of clever female empowerment, when he first got inaugurated as the president, and she wasn't there, she was staying in New York, and I was reading this article about it. Apparently what she was doing was renegotiating a prenup to basically, she had him by the balls saying, I will come and I will be the first lady, but you've got to give me a shit ton more money. So I'm giving her, yeah, I'm with you, I think 3 to 6 months, and she is like, I have done my piece, I am taking my money and I am leaving in my caftan and my flip-flops.
Good on her.
Yeah. So anyway, we're here to talk about female power. One of the things, I mean, I was really, really emotional when I was watching kind of Kamala Harris do her acceptance speech at the inauguration and all the rest of it. I was emotional because it is a massive, massive deal for America, isn't it? Hillary Clinton tried to become the president and she couldn't bloody manage it. And everybody was like, well, everyone would rather have Trump, an absolute psychotic arsehole, over a woman, and it was true. And then now they have a woman of color as the vice president in the United States, and it's a big moment for them, and they were talking about that. But one of the things that really annoyed me was the fact that they were saying, this is a great step for women around the world and blah blah blah. Well, women around the rest of the world, most of the country, well, not most, but a lot of other countries have had female leaders. If you look at the UK, at one point a few years ago, we had a female prime minister, there was a female premier of Scotland, a female premier of Northern Ireland, the less said about her the better. There was a female head of the Metropolitan Police, there was a female head of the Fire Brigade Service. Women are leading the way. Do you not think that America hasn't quite caught up with this?
Rish.
Go on.
There is something to say about, you know, it's right, you know, it's sort of old news in that way, but I suppose for America, America's, where do you even start? It's like a million different countries rolled into one. It's so hard. The more difference, the larger you get, it's like dragging a dinosaur forward. So yeah, it's a massive step forward for them. You know, they often talk about, you know, smaller countries, you can be more nimble. It's true of business, isn't it? A smaller startup can be much more nimble about a cultural change than, you know, a larger dinosaur-esque corporation that's been around for years. So I think that's sort of what's at play maybe in America. It's just so large and vast, and they're so the opposite of the United States, aren't they?
Yeah. Have you been, Joe?
Yeah. I travelled to America quite a lot in my old job. Yeah.
Whereabouts did you go?
So I've mainly been East Coast, I must admit. So to New York, but I've also been to the South, so Atlanta, Texas, Washington. Probably missing some out, but for some reason I never made it to the West Coast.
Well, I've never been at all. I've got a lot of family and friends who live in America. My dad's side of the family is Guyanese, so a lot of them moved to America from Guyana. My granddad and my uncle were the only ones that came to the UK. So we've got a lot of family there. So I keep in touch with people, but it's a place I've never been to. Have you been, Rish?
I have, yeah. I've been a couple of times doing the sightseeing thing in New York, basically. So I've been for that. And the first time I went, I never actually wanted to go. It was never a place that I was on my bucket list. You know, I didn't really have the vibe for it, but I went for a wedding. So yeah, and it was, for me, it was very much the kind of place of, I enjoyed it more when I got home because it's so fast. It's so fast and there's so much to do, you know, like in that sightseeing kind of, you know, vibe, you don't stop. Do you know what I mean? It's like the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. So yeah, it's nice to come away and look back at it. But yeah, I'd go again in a heartbeat. But I think, you know, the issue that, you know, as we love sweeping generalizations on this chat, we can't really comprehend how it truly is in America. And you know, from my perspective, even from the UK, you know, it's not so long ago, you know, that we had, you know, massive issues with, you know, equality, both from a female perspective and a race perspective. Do you know what I mean? It's people think that this history was like hundreds of years ago, and it's not. Do you know what I mean? It's like in a blink of an eye, really. You know, and I think we are quite sheltered, I guess, really, for how it truly is in the States, because you see that New York vibe and how cool it is and how, you know, forward thinking and this, that and the other. But that's just the tiniest part of America. Do you know what I mean? There's this swathe of everything else, and you know, it is like, you know, different countries basically everywhere.
I've never been, but Dally went. His best friend married a girl from Tennessee and lives out there. They've been married for quite a few years now. So Dally went when they got married, but it was literally like I'd had Leon about 3 weeks earlier, and I was like, I'm not getting on a plane. I'm not going. You know, you'll have to go by yourself. So I didn't go. But one of the things that Dally always says is that you when you're in the cities, you know, it's a first world country, massive amounts of money, very kind of liberal thinking, typical city kind of vibe. But you only need to go out a little bit into the suburbs of America. And he said some of it's almost like a third world country. He said they are so poor. And I was watching something about, you know, New Orleans and stuff after the Hurricane Katrina, and they were saying it's still like that. You know, there are shanty towns that still haven't been rebuilt because of the poverty that is there. And though that's one of the big problems with America, isn't it? That it has this massive kind of two diametrically opposed worlds of the absolute riches and the absolute poverty, and they're trying to bring all this together and marry it together. I mean, that's why it's so hard to have this kind of unifying voice, isn't it?
Definitely.
Did you see any of that?
No.
I didn't see so much. I mean, I was always there sort of for business, but I'd do a bit of traveling, and I'd sort of, I think one of the it's just the vastness of the country you can't really take in. And then, once you get out of the cities, it's the type of the small town, vibe, which is can be wonderful as well. Really met some hospitable people, probably putting ourselves in strange situations, getting free lifts from all sorts of people, that type of thing, but some really old-fashioned values as well that felt like you were going back in the past. You'd go past somewhere where you wouldn't really think much about going to a pub here. Certain places you thought, a woman, it's not, you'd be giving off the wrong vibe to go and drink in that bar. There was definitely places like that we came across. So in some time it was like stepping back into the past, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing, that whole thing of, the kind of traditional values, especially if you think about that kind of Bible Belt, Southern America, it is very Christian. It has those very traditional values. And you're absolutely right, Reece. Race is still a huge, huge conversation there. And we're not here to talk about race today, but that's a massive part of their narrative. And even if you watch, American sitcoms, the whole race thing is so present in everything they talk about, isn't it? Whereas here that just isn't. And I think one of the things with America is that the race conversation has been so dominant that the gender conversation has never even had a look in. They just don't seem to get around to that. And so they're stuck in this very traditional viewpoint. Well, I say stuck in quite a derogatory way. They're probably quite happy. But they have this very traditional, very Christian view of, the woman is at home and she's a homemaker. And that's what they're fighting to get out of. And I think perhaps that's potentially why they are kind of 20 years behind us in terms of gender equality. So no, what do you think?
For sure. And I think, the people, women being in positions of power now, for me, it's, I look at it and I obviously see it from both perspectives, both from a female, but also a person of colour. And, so for me, it's mainly about having those role models, that are there and in places and where you can tell and say, there's somebody that looks like me doing something, that's running the world essentially. And maybe that's why it is such a big issue, because as whatever opinion you have, the States is, one of the, if not the biggest power in the world, whether we like it or not. And, people look to it to, kind of make change or to implement things or to, there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes around with the States, isn't there, really? So it's...
there absolutely is. And it's a good point, that, because I think one of the things that we think about when we have this kind of Eurocentric view that we have, even though, we're not in Europe anymore, we have seen women in positions of power. We've got Angela Merkel, one of the most powerful women in Europe. And, as I say, we've had Theresa May and Margaret Thatcher, and we've got, what's the name, young woman, the Scottish person, what's the name, Nicola Sturgeon and all the rest of it, But again, they are white, middle-class, middle-aged women, and they have reached positions of power mainly because they don't have children. They've sacrificed childcare in order to have that career, and they've got there because they've still been to good schools, blah, blah, blah. They've followed the male path, haven't they? Whereas Kamala Harris, yes, she's a woman, but she's a woman of colour as well. She's come from a fairly poor, at best you could say it's a kind of mediocre background, but really it's a fairly poor immigrant background. And if you are in countries such as Dubai or Russia, or you won't have seen, you might not even be aware of who Angela Merkel or Theresa May are. So she perhaps is going to be one of the first women that people are going to see, and that does make a massive difference. Being able to see women in positions of power means that you can then aspire to be there, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And poet who spoke at the is Amanda Gorman. She actually referenced that in her recital, didn't she? Seeing Kamala Harris, such an inspiration as a woman of colour herself. It really matters, that representation. So it is incredible. It's so in that way, you could argue America have maybe, they've stepped over a little bit because they've sidestepped the typical middle-aged white woman and and chose someone very different where, you know, Europe hasn't got that yet, maybe.
Yeah, it is important. You know, I'm trying to think of female leaders. So, you know, India and Pakistan have had female leaders who aren't of color, aren't they? But when you think kind of on the global stage and you think of who the big players are, so it's Russia and it's China and it's potentially some of the Arab countries. And then it is America, and yeah, they absolutely haven't seen that. And you're right, they've kind of sidestepped that traditional role. I mean, we've got a session coming up on kind of intersectional feminism, haven't we? So we can talk about that in more detail there. But it is so important that it isn't just because, yes, getting women to positions of power, but still white, middle class, middle-aged women, we're still not massively breaking that glass ceiling, aren't we? We need those women who are, and she still is fairly young, isn't she? I think she's in her 40s. Is she 45, 46? But yeah, you know, she's fairly young. She's very dynamic. She's obviously very intelligent, and it is a massive step for America. We absolutely can't underestimate that, can we?
And I think, you know, for the American people, it's another thing that I don't think we can truly appreciate in the UK as to, you know, what a massive change it is. Yeah, we know Trump's an arse, you know, and, you know, the things that he's done and, you know, we all kind of look at it in horror, you know, and the world took a breath, you know, when he walked out. However, you know, we don't have that same kind of, that it's we don't know, you know, we don't have the same, you know, kind of feelings as they do in America. You know, it is different whether we like it or not. You know, we can have the, you know, the movements and all of that kind of stuff, and you know, I firmly believe that we look at that from our own perspectives, you know, and you know, in the States you can get shot just for walking down the street. It is as simple as that, you know, and so their collective, you know, breath was a little bit different, I think, you know, than it was necessarily for the rest of the world. So I think it's, you know, let's face it, there's still an awful lot to do. You know, it's not like, you know, these people come into power and all of a sudden everything's fine. You know, but it's a symbolism, I guess, really of how things are changing, hopefully. But let's not, you know, I'm sure she'll be absolutely, you know, obliterated by the press in about maybe a couple of days. Do you know what I mean? Like,
you know,
once it's over and how lovely it is, okay, let's talk about what she's wearing. Let's talk about, you know, how her hair is today. You know, it will absolutely go down that same kind of space.
That is a really, really crucial point, because you're right, and I mean, I keep thinking like, oh, in this country we're a bit further on and blah blah blah. In a way, to them, this is like when Margaret Thatcher got power in the 80s. You know, and not saying that any of us are particular big Thatcher fans, but that's where we were. You know, there weren't that many women in power. She was the first one. That's the position Kamala Harris is in, and still, absolutely, we know that the conversation will be about, you know, what is she wearing and what's her hair like and what's her skincare regime and how does she look after her husband when she's in such a position of power, and oh look, she's had to not have children so that she can get. I mean, already, I don't know if I was reading quite a lot about the inauguration day coverage, and most of the things that I could find about her were about what she was wearing and the kind of symbolism, and even with the first lady, I can't remember her name, but it was like, oh, what's the symbolism of her dress and who made her dress, and oh, she had an outfit change and blah blah blah. That's absolutely going to become the narrative, isn't it?
In fact, I googled, you know, women at 2021 inauguration, and it just brought up all fashion pages, and I was like, that's not what I'm interested in. I want to know who the guests were, who, you know, that's So we're not going to escape it just by popping someone in position. It doesn't erase years, hundreds and thousands of years of inequality, sadly. And I think it's going to be a harder job. She's going to be under that spotlight in a way that shouldn't be if she was a man. I mean, I still remember it was with Theresa May became prime minister. All the talk of her kitten heels and all of that kind of stuff. I remember seeing a spoof version, which is let's talk about what her husband's wearing, and describing him in a way as if he would have been a woman, how, he flirtily wore his tie and all that kind of crap that, women get described as. But it is, all that.
It is, yeah, it is.
So I mean, we're a long way from just changing that narrative, but it's a good step in the right direction. And, there's that little hope is, Biden knows what he's doing. He's not a young bloke, but he's making a powerful statement with the people he's choosing to surround himself with, and choosing her as the vice president. It's like we're talking about how long till the divorce comes in for Trump. It's like how long till Biden's like, I'm tired. It's time for you to step up.
Have you, I don't know if any of you have listened to Dead Ringers, the BBC, I think it's on Radio 4. It's like, when they do impersonations of famous people. And on Dead Ringers, the one of the ones at the moment is Kamala basically running the show. And Joe rings up every now and again and says, what are we supposed to be doing? And she's like, oh, no, it's all right. You go back and put your slippers on. I've got it all under control. We'll be all right. And yeah, I mean, how amazing would it be if she was president? I mean, not wishing Joe Biden death or ill health or whatever, but can you just imagine if in 4 years' time she was taking over as the president? I mean, now that would be amazing news, wouldn't it?
Yeah. For me, I kind of, because I saw the same stuff. I have to admit, I didn't watch it because I am balls deep in marmalade, because it is Seville. Literally got jars and oranges all over the bastard place. So that's where I'm at. But what I did see was obviously fashion related, to be honest. But what I thought is, it's almost like, though, she has to have that extra level of awareness for every single thing that she does. So the fashion choice, right? Okay, we shouldn't have to have the conversation, but it's there. But already she's making a difference with those choices, because the thing that I read was that actually, people of colour and, well, people in general didn't want to represent Melania in any way, shape or form. They didn't want to be associated with her and with that kind of, vibe. But now straight away, they're choosing, up and coming designers and, designers of colour and this, that and the other. So there's a lot of statements being made, all over the place, without necessarily, saying things, which I think.
Also, I mean, it's just the people that arrived and that starred in the inauguration. I mean, Trump really struggled to get celebrities to perform at his inauguration, and yet they were literally lining up for this one, weren't they? And that in itself is a massive difference. And I think I do just want to come back to a point that you said, Rish, about when we, and I'm not trying to do it down, when we watch America going, oh my God, there's a woman in a position of power, this gives hope to little girls everywhere, and we're thinking, well, we've had that for 30 years, it's but slavery is still within living memory for them. They are so much further in terms of kind of history and equality and everything else, all of that Jim Crow laws and segregation and everything is still within living memory in America, and that's huge, and we can't underestimate that. And for a woman of color still to come and reach that position of power, I'm not trying to take anything away from her whatsoever.
It's massive, and I think that's it. That's my kind of thought on all of, there's been an awful lot happen over the past year, hasn't there? Let's face it, and but it's not long ago, within 100 years, that this stuff has changed, and even, to my parents, for example, I'm very lucky, quite frankly, that I don't have to deal with all sorts of things that, other people have had to, so one generation away is that, my mum and dad would be looked at and, on the street, and he would be stopped and searched by police just for the sake of it, just because of the, the colour of his skin, and that is my dad. It's not like, we're talking, granddads. It's, one generation away. So I think it's, it's a huge thing, that people, are, you know, surrounding themselves, like Joe said, with people that can make change and make difference and appear different. You know, because for me, you know, being, you know, how old I am, 38, it's like, well, actually, there's not been anyone that looks like me in a position of power, and now there is. You know, so even at my age, there's still something to be said for that. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, the difference between little girls is immense.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, my grandparents, on my dad's side, they came from British Guyana in the 60s, and when they arrived, there were signs up saying, you know, no blacks and no Irish and no dogs, and you know, they really struggled through that. So yeah, and you look at, you know, I'm not trying to sound like, you know, oh, we've got it all perfect in the UK, because when you look at how many female black women are in Parliament, there are still not a lot of them. You know, I think, was it Una King was the first one in 97, or 96 or 97, and still from there we've still got really small numbers. And one thing I would like, I was looking at the numbers for the number of women overall in the USA Senate and House of Representatives, and there are 25% still. That's women, white women, women of color, but there are 25% women in positions of power in America compared to 75% men. We're slightly better in the UK. We have slightly more women, but still few of them are women of color. So they do still have a long way to go, don't they? It's, again, you can't just sit there and say, no, yeah, there's a woman of color in the White House. That's it. We're done. Let's all go home. Still a long way to go, isn't there?
But but once you get the right people in that position of power, I think women are really good at lifting up other women. So there's that cascade effect of, you know, what I can aspire to be because I see someone looking like me, but also being in that position of power. You know, we might, you know, say, oh, what a shame, they're all talking about what they're wearing, but as Rish was saying, you know, those women, they understand that they have that power, that if that's going to be the type of attention put on them, that I'm going to use that power to raise other people up. And you know, the more women you get in power, that's the kind of cascade effect that's really positive. So you can only hope that having someone in such a high position of power can help pave that way, you know, for generations to come, but also whilst they're in power as well, you know, recognizing those talents, bringing them up, or finding a way to do that. It's going to be a good thing.
I do also think, you know, I don't want us to sound really snobby about this, because yes, you know, most of us, let's say for sake of argument, 90% of the articles that were written were about what they were wearing. But the women who are going to read those articles about what those women are wearing, that might be the only way that they, you know, they're not going to read a political manifesto, so they might not even realize. Whereas if they go to Cosmo and they read an article about what Kamala Harris is wearing, they're aware of who she is and they're aware that she's a politician. So, you know, we're being a little bit what's the word, a little bit snidey about, oh, they're only talking about her fashion, but actually that might be the best way of getting that message through to the most number of women.
Make politics more accessible, you know.
And that's what I mean about that kind of stance of, you know, what you're wearing. Okay, well, they're gonna, like Joe said, they're gonna have that conversation, so let's make it worthwhile. Let's you know, talk about the young designer that's made that. Let's bring the next person and let's bring the next person up. You know, I think it's a very, very clever way of looking at things, and that's what I like about this kind of whole conversation, is that, you know, okay, we use that to the advantage. You know, it is what it is. People are going to have that conversation anyway, so let's get clever about it, let's get cute about it, and actually make a difference in a slightly different way. That's what I love about women. We can do that, can't we?
I'm gonna sell you my political agenda, and I'm gonna do it through shoes.
Exactly.
It does make me think, though, sadly, on the flip side is where we've seen the media, and in some cases, one could argue part of the UK, turn against a woman of colour in power. And I'm thinking of Meghan Markle. Whereas, you know, what is the truth of it? Whatever you want to say, the UK tabloids took against her on the whole. And I remember recently, I tried to avoid any of that kind of clickbait, but there was an example. There was her she appeared in something, and she was wearing something that had a message behind it, but it was all very eye rolly, and you know, the response to it was not positive. So it's just going to be tricky. It's just any woman in position of power.
Yeah, and I think one of the problems there is that you have to be an incredibly strong. I mean, we've talked about this before, haven't we? Women who put their heads above the parapet, and the ones that are the first, first of anything, they've got to be so thick-skinned, because you've then just literally got to stand there and take that barrage of abuse. I mean, look at the amount of abuse bloody Diane Abbott gets just for being a black woman. You've got to be able to stand there and take it. And what Meghan Markle did was she had the audacity to say, I'm not dealing with your shit. I'm going to move to Canada and I'm going to do my own podcast. And I'm going to write my own article and fuck you all. And she went off. And that was a big part of the reason why they turned, I mean, they were against her before, but I think that was why they turned so much more against her, wasn't it? She's like, I'm powerful to have my own voice. So yeah, it's that thing of you've got to have that thick skin. You've got to have that staying power. And we're asking a lot. Most, I wouldn't do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to put myself in that position and just be attacked by everybody. So again, we're relying on other women to do it for us, aren't we?
It's real hard because, don't you feel that just in general? I know we've talked about this before, but, this is like why I kind of hate being on social media, because as soon as you have an opinion about anything, then the keyboard warriors, you're ripe for whatever it is that people want to throw at you, whether it's, an actual, proper discussion point, or just someone being an arse because they can. Do you know what I mean? I think it's it's a really unpleasant place to be, really. So
it is, and we're going to come back to that, because it is a conversation that we had last year, but we're going to come back to it because Hannah posted something in an SEO group on Facebook about the sexism inherent in the sector, and lots of people jumped into mansplain to her that she probably just had some bad experiences, and maybe she should try and get a job somewhere else if she'd experienced, like, not that she could possibly be a director of her own company. That, somebody, she must just have a bit of a sleazy boss. So we are going to come back to that. We are out of time for this one, but do we think that this is another step? I mean, I know we can't say, oh, the world has magically changed, because obviously we had Obama, we had a black man, and then the backlash from that was Trump. So, yes, we've got a black woman in power now. America is probably going to have a backlash and not let that lie. We'll have to see what happens. But do we think that this is, obviously it's positive, but is this going to massively change things? Is this just another step and we've broken another barrier, and on the whole we're heading in the right direction?
Well, Joe?
Well, definitely heading in the right direction. It feels at the moment barrier busting, but until we see some kind of results in the, whether it's the population of the USA turning around with their opinions and it actually having a tangible effect, it'll be really hard to measure and understand how much of progress has been made, but it is progress, and I feel positive.
Yeah, Rach?
Yeah, kind of the same, really. It's we're just going to have to wait and see, I guess, really, aren't we? Because okay, it's a positive step, with how things have been and how things, have changed so much so recently. But it's a case of there were, thousands and thousands of people that voted for Trump. And, it wasn't just an absolute landslide for these guys. You know what I mean? It was kind of, there's still that there, so I guess we'll have to wait and see. And, maybe common sense will prevail at some point. Who knows?
I think the thing that we have to remember is that definitely with America, it sometimes feels like it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still 1 step further forward. So yes, there's going to be a backlash. Yes, the white extremist Bible Belt people are going to go berserk and blah blah blah, but they've broken that barrier. The world is 1 step forward. We just keep moving in that direction. It's all got to be good, hasn't it? So there we go. We've solved the world in 35 minutes. Easy. Right, thank you, girls. We are Shooting the Shit is getting its own channel soon, so we are going to be having a YouTube channel, and we are going to be putting this out as a podcast. There will also be a Shooting the Shit Facebook page coming, so watch this space. We are going global because the world deserves to hear our opinions, doesn't it, girls?
Yeah.
They're going to hear them whether they like it or not. Right. We'll be back in 2 weeks. So we'll see you then. Thank you.